What's your I hated that person, but they didn't deserve that story? When I first began freshman year in high school, I was bullied mercilessly by a junior. I have no idea why this guy hated me, but he did. He was bigger than me and stronger than me and would push me around, call me names, make fun of other people if he saw them talking to me, etc. I'm old, and when I was in high school, if you told an adult you were being bullied, they'd tell you useless crap like, just ignore him and he'll go away. That never worked. It got so bad I thought about dropping out of school, thought about suicide, didn't know how to deal. And then one day I get to school and see a couple girls he was friends with crying. See a couple teachers with very concerned looks on their faces. And then when homeroom starts, the principal gets on the PA and announces that my bully had been in a car accident and died the night before. He certainly didn't deserve to die. I wouldn't support the death penalty for bullying, but man, did my life ever change after he died. I finally started making friends. I could walk through the halls not worried about getting picked on. I really started to flourish academically. I got into a good college and now have a good career and life. I think there's a pretty good chance I would have dropped out of high school, and a smaller but still real chance I would have committed suicide if this kid hadn't died. This is bad, but it really seems like a better him than you situation. My brother had this friend Peggy. She was an awful influence on him, as well as just being an obnoxious, gross person. Well, one day she just up and moved to the Myrtle Beach area. We're in Western NC, so it was a good ways away. Sometime when she was down there, she was in a four-wheeler accident. She ended up paralyzed from the neck down. With years and years of physical therapy and dedication, she still one day regained mobility. But nobody deserves that. Her parents never went to see her when she was in the hospital. Not once. My ex was a real bust to me. Cheating, screaming, throwing things, the whole deal. 3 months after I finally broke up with him, I got a call from a friend of his. He, at 20, had dropped dead on a bus and no one knew why. It turned out he had undiagnosed testicular cancer that spread to his lungs, closing his airway. Wouldn't have ever spoken to him again, but he didn't deserve to die. Dude I went to high school with was my arch nemesis. He was in my sports teams and just was constantly giving me crap all the time. Bullying to the maximum. Couldn't do much about it honestly. He even started physically fighting me in the middle of a game once. Anyway, he's the only person I've ever met that I hated. Found out a year ago or so, 12 years later, that his dad was being charged with child molestation and apparently abused him too. Never a guy you'd expect. Mr. Tough Guy and all that. Kind of rednecky. Anyway, there was obviously a lot more going on with that kid than 16-year-old me understood or could ever understand. I still feel like I hate him, but I at least understand it now. Had an art teacher in middle school. Was obvious he was just biding time till retirement and hated kids now. Not that we were angels or anything. He wasn't half bad at art either, but can tell he was kinda disappointed in where his life ended up. Anyways, goes on vacation in the mountains and ends up having a heart attack and driving off a cliff. He didn't make it. Heck of a way to go. My middle school bully dropped dead of an aneurysm less than a month into her freshman year. Her parents were apparently already going through a brutal, booze-fueled divorce, and one of them for some reason thought it was a good idea to try and sell their child's art to cover funeral costs, which were her 2003 era photo booth selfies. She was a terrible person, but she was also not even 14 yet, still trying to unpack that one. To give you an outside perspective, I don't think anyone is the person they are going to be at 14. Sounds like they probably had a bad home life. That said, it's not fair that you had to take the brunt of their outbursts. My aunt, mom's sister, and her husband, no blood relation, used to publicly make fun of my dad for being unemployed at gatherings and holiday dinners, etc. Several years later, my dad finished his career change and became a software engineer. My uncle became unemployed for the next 8 years. After finally finding work about 5 years ago in another continent, he moved there alone and worked there until 2014. In June 2014, we heard news from my aunt that he had passed away from a heart attack, alone on another continent, away from my aunt and their kids. His body was discovered in the bathroom after he had been dead for more than 3 days. It must have been super hard for your dad to hold his tongue during those 8 years. I don't think I would have been the bigger person. I would have been all Naya. Former co-worker was a B to everyone and got away with doing nothing. Everyone could see it and everyone hated her for it. She got pregnant and milked it for everything it was worth. Baby died in utero just a few days before due date due to a blood clot in the umbilical cord. Would never wish that sort of thing on anyone. Those deaths are the worst because you still have to have the baby. It's too big for them to terminate the pregnancy any other way. She would have had to go through the trauma of natural birth or a C-section and never get the baby at the end. A guy my cousin dated that burned our apartment down because he was mad at her. About 8 years later he was killed by a prison guard spraying pepper spray directly in his face like 6 times in a row. Guy from my high school that everyone hated and thought was an butthole. Never spoke 2 words to me, so I have no first-hand knowledge. He was the star quarterback and destined for Division I glory like his older brother. End of senior year he breaks his leg and all his scholarships evaporated. Ended up at a Div 3 school or something. Never made a splash. Now, he's divorced and legitimately insane. He constantly posts gibberish on his Facebook page, like just crazed musings several times a day. Then Google translates them into various random languages and posts those. One time he posted all of his high school football commendations, newspaper clippings, and Div 1 scholarship recruitment letters. Literally over 100 pics. He is a living embodiment of glory days. A very very sad and disturbed guy. That sounds like he could have had a psychotic break. 18-24 is the age range where diseases like schizophrenia usually manifest. I hope he is getting help. Kid I knew in school, bullied me all the time, consistently in trouble, got me in trouble a few times too, finally expelled, good riddance. Heard intermittent stories over the next few years of him being in and out of trouble. Reconnected with him through a mutual friend 20 years later and found out he'd had a very abusive childhood and bounced around various foster homes. That explained everything. We've been friends for several years now. He's happily married and living a great life. Whoa, good for you for being able to rise above that abuse and befriend him. Glad everything worked out for you both. A girl I went to primary school with bullied me relentlessly throughout reception to year 5. It quickly got to the point where my parents and teachers were on first name basis due to all the meetings they had about it. In year 3, I think, her older brother was killed in a quad bike accident. She and her older sisters were out of school for about 2 weeks, and her brother had a memorial tree planted for him at the school and the secondary school he went to. When she came back, we were okay with each other for a bit. Think I remember comforting her several times after it had happened. Then it just went back to normal. I mean, he didn't deserve that and she didn't deserve to have her brother die. But someone who doesn't freaking learn compassion for the person who helped them when they were down is still an butthole. I took a transfer at work to get away from a crazy co-worker. A few months later I was asked to come back and cover for a couple days. I was really hoping Crazy wouldn't be there, but she showed up. Only for the manager to have someone take her to the hospital. She was having severe abdominal pain that ended up being a ruptured ovary. I didn't want to spend the day with her, but I didn't want her gone that badly. A girl I went to high school with was a holier than thou super B. She had to make nasty comments about everything, and though she was the greatest thing since sliced bread, she particularly disliked one of my good friends, who was super nice to everyone and ridiculously pretty, and did her best to make my friend feel like crap, which is when I started having problems with her. Some time after we graduated, she had a tonsillectomy. Again, I was far from close to her, so I heard all this secondhand. But one day after the surgery she was home alone and the incision in her throat opened up and she drowned in her own blood. I imagine that had to have been a horrible way to die, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. That's some Final Destination type crap. Jesus. My ex-wife, who we will call Jane, left me and moved in with a family friend, who we will call Steve. Both were in their mid-40s. Jane swore up and down that it was purely platonic. They wound up moving across the country and getting a 1-bedroom apartment together. Now, I'm pretty trusting, but that raised some red flags that this might not be platonic after all. Jane was looking for alimony, which she would be entitled to, but not if she was living with Steve as a couple. So I tried to gather evidence that they were a couple while she stonewalled and delayed turning over the evidence. The divorce dragged on for something like 18 months longer than it should have. Eventually, we agreed on a compromise. I would pay her alimony, but only for another year. She'd be entitled to another 12 years if she weren't with Steve, and only at about 40-50% of the dollar amount she'd ordinarily be entitled to. 2 weeks after we signed the settlement agreement, Steve dropped dead of a stroke. Seems fishy. My French teacher lost her husband because he drowned. I didn't hate her at all, but many people from my class did. One time during French class, one of them screamed "man overboard" and everyone lay on the ground. My teacher ran out of the room, crying. Frick them for that. Seriously. Kid that used to bother me every day during middle school hung himself. The real kicker is I had wished this many times. My friend's boyfriend in high school was a major dong. He was kind of a redneck Regina George of sorts, had a huge following of like-minded idiots who he verbally abused constantly. He cheated on my friend when they were dating. She stupidly forgave him. Then they went on a break and he immediately slept with her. Then, best friend. He was unabashedly a bad person. This year in May he was diagnosed with malignant melanoma and died 3 months later at 21. It sucks that he died so young, but I'm not going to celebrate him because of it. The dude was an butthole. I hate that after people die, you're supposed to act as if they were a wonderful person who did absolutely nothing wrong in their life. Heaven gained an angel. Shut up, Patrice. Earth lost a sociopath. Homeless guy we used to pick up in my old M's days was rude and called for the dumbest crap ever. One night he got hit by a truck and dragged like 30 blocks under it. I wasn't the responder on that call, but he was still alive at the time. They intubated him on the side of the road and raced him to the hospital, but he died anyways. Only condolence was he was probably super S-faced as usual, which is how he probably ended up under the truck. Stories I heard from the crew though sounded like he was in super rough shape. Sounded like he was in super rough shape. I imagine getting dragged under a truck against the pavement for 30 blocks will do that. My best friend for high school and most of college was my bully. She behaved how I understand abusive partners do. She alienated everyone around me until she was my only friend, belittled my interests, successes, looks, clothes, everything. She forced me to put something she soaked in her wee in my mouth, would throw my stuff out of the window and lock me out when I went to get it. It would often break. Took my lunch off me every school day for 2 years and even punished me with silent treatment when I would achieve in class or talk to other people. When I went in for surgery and she offered to bring me home and be my assistant for 24 hours after the anesthetic, but then abandoned me and laughed at my pain. I'd had enough. I also had a long-term boyfriend, so felt supported, and cut her out of my life. Jump forward 8 or so years and I hear her mum has passed away. I then find out the horrifying circumstances of her death. She rang all of her children to alert them that she was about to take her life. All the children were at least a couple of hours drive away, but one of the sons got there in time to see a small fire and tried to get his mum out. She was hiding and he spent the time finding her rather than calling for help or putting it out. He succeeded twice, but she would run back in each time. The fire is now out of control and the son can no longer safely enter the building. He sustained injuries going back when he shouldn't have anyway. My old friend arrived to see the fire service turn up. Her brother sobbing on the lawn and her childhood home on fire. Her mum was killed in the blaze she set. This kid who would beat the crap out of me and my friend in elementary school was taken away from his parents because of abuse and neglect. He would be chained up in the backyard and fed dog food as a regular punishment. That and beatings were the only specifics I heard about. Nobody deserves that. That's fricked. There is this parent at the school I work at whose kid falsely accused a teacher of physical abuse. The kid was easily proved to be a liar and even admitted her injuries were fake. Well, that didn't stop her mom from going all in with a lawsuit and making that innocent teacher's life a living heck. A few months later, the girl went to the grocery store with her grandfather, came home, and discovered her mother's savagely murdered body. Her ex-con dad was there while she was at the store and killed her mother. I never liked the girl or the mom, but dang. To make it worse, the girl was a massive bully. When she returned after the murder, almost everyone was supportive. However, a few of her former victims had a vulnerability to exploit. I didn't hate him, I just hated talking to him. He was a friend from school, let's call him Jake. who was extremely social and loved talking. He was also the son of a politician with a lot of money, and when I say loved talking I mean he wouldn't ever shut up. He was in my high school class, and since we were neighbors we'd walk home together, and oh my god, he was a talkie. As a depressed introvert on the spectrum, I could barely tolerate 10-minute conversations, but he'd keep at it forever. Once he followed me home and decided to tell my mum about his future venues until 5 in the afternoon. We didn't have enough food to offer him something, so we had to suck it up and not have lunch until he left, which was awful. You might now understand why one day I just didn't feel like walking home with him, so I made up some excuse about talking to my crush to stay a bit longer until he was gone. Later that day I went on Facebook and saw people posting weird stuff on his wall, so I asked his BFF about it. He was kidnapped. His uncle arrived in a van and picked him up halfway, told him he was his ride to a family gathering, and he unknowingly got in. He then asked for a huge ransom, kept Jake for a few months, and since he couldn't have him talk about who did it, he just killed him and dumped him on a riverbed. Jake was morbidly obese when he was kidnapped. When they found his body, he was so thin they barely recognized him. His uncle had starved him to death so he wouldn't tell who did it. Eventually 2 of his henchmen turned themselves in and talked, but the damage was already done. I felt guilty for years. Maybe he wouldn't have taken him if we had walked home together. Maybe he would have taken both of us and I wouldn't have to live with this. Who knows? All I know is my actions may have led to him having a horrible death because I just didn't feel like talking that day. I'm extremely protective of my friends. I never say no to someone who needs to talk, and never let them walk home alone. I don't believe in God or family love being unconditional, but the only thing I can say about my friend is, he didn't deserve it. He was just lonely and wanted to talk. He definitely didn't deserve that, but you also definitely don't deserve to feel guilty or blame yourself for his death. There's no way to know what would have happened had you walked home with him. Perhaps the uncle would have taken you, too. I'm glad you are there for your friends, but you are in no way to blame for what happened to Jake. My coworker. She was mean, petty, rude, unhelpful, and an all-around bully. Pretty much a 16-year-old mean girl in a 35-year-old adult's body. I almost quit my job a couple times because of her and another coworker just like her. Last year she was diagnosed with breast cancer and it has progressed to stage IV. She's been missing more and more work and should be out on permanent disability because she's dying and should be spending time with her kids, not coming to work. In high school, we had a math teacher who hated our class, and by the end of the school year, she made a vow she would fail every single one of us for her class. Before exams started, however, she took a trip to Eritrea where she got on a bus with some other tourists. A few days later, we got a call from our guidance counselor that she'd been gunned down by robbers on some dirt road. No math exam that year. Girl at my school, total social climber and bitched about people constantly, was totally obsessed with horse riding and got into a serious accident where she fell off her horse and hit her head, was in a coma for a week and currently can't ride again for 5 years. Guy who bullied me as a kid was an MLB prospect till he ran his mouth at a party and was stabbed in the chest. He survived but it killed his ball-playing career. A fresh ex was planning on getting inspirational words tattooed on her wrist. One of the words was friendship. The tattoo came out as friendship. I didn't really hate her, but you know, and ex is an ex. Friendship is forever. My kindergarten teacher. She was horrible and abusive toward children. The kind who tied kids to a chair or put duct tape on the mouth of chatty kid. She had a car accident a few years ago while she was driving with 2 of her grandchildren. A drunk driver hit her. She was in a coma for a few weeks, but recovered physically. The 2 kids, however, didn't make it. She fell into deep depression. Last I heard, she was still in a psych ward. My 8th grade math teacher. I didn't hate her. She was always really nice to me, but all of my classmates hated her. I remember one time a girl asked her how she felt about her younger sister getting married before her. She cried in front of all of us. She died of breast cancer and she never got married. No, this one is just sad. There were these 2 jerks in my gym class. One day they had to go retrieve a soccer ball that had fallen into the bushes. They stepped into a hornet's nest. They got stung everywhere. Apparently one got stung in the privates. They didn't deserve it, but I did like that I got to leave gym half an hour early. Dude in high school was pretty much a dong to everybody, but he made it a point to frick with my little brother and my girlfriend and basically say horrendous things, so I would fight him in the park and parking lots, etc. Big ol' piece of crap. So I hated him and all that, but after high school, he got real addicted to painkillers, then eventually one day he nodded off at the wheel while high, rolled his truck, was ejected, crushed and ultimately killed. Even though I would immediately want to punch him in the face every time he was around, I still felt bad when I heard the news. He deserved misery, but not that. He most definitely deserved it. It was his choice to get behind the wheel high, and that is one of the most selfish, disgraceful things one can do. My drug addicted ex stole a bunch of my crap, and a few months later she was hit by a truck while trying to cross the street. She died. There was a girl I went to middle school with who was just generally not a nice person. She was a cheerleader, and I think it kind of went to her head. She would make fun of people who weren't cheerleaders for their makeup, clothes, athletic ability, etc. just because she could. One day she went four-wheeling with a guy and they ended up wrecking into a dump truck. From what I'm told, she flew over the guy and into the truck and went brain dead. Her family kept her in a vegetative state for a few months until they finally took her off of life support. She was 15. She wasn't the nicest person and was pretty mean to a lot of people, but she was just a kid. She may have grown into a better person, but we will never know. Summer camp water skiing instructor was an absolute B. She would always talk about how bad we were to the others in the boat while we were putting our skis on in the water, and she would always gun it right away. So practically no one even got up for more than a second all week. On the second to last day, she was carrying a gas can on her head to bring it down to the boat, but she spilled it all in her eyes and on her face and everything. Still don't know if she's alright to this day. Carrying a gas can on her head. Frankly, that seems like a dumb thing to do. In high school, I somehow got into a silly fight with this kid. It wasn't due to anything big, just stupid stuff, and no one really got hurt and it was more or less a draw. But afterwards, he graffitied some lame thing about me. I remember thinking that karma will eventually even things out somehow. A couple of months later, his older brother killed their parents. I don't think I ever knew what really went down and I never saw him again. But I remember thinking, geez, karma went a little overboard there. A fairly unkind but pretty and popular girl from my high school had an accident while getting ready for prom. She was checking the back of her hair or something, IDK, when her large mirror fell on her. I believe it hit head first and shattered glass all over her. It sliced up her face, shoulders, and arms bad enough to put her in the hospital. Freaking horrific. When I was younger, about 8 or 9 years old, we had a computer teacher that would teach us touch typing. I was generally quite a quiet kid until one day when the guy sitting next to me started laughing at this picture of a monkey smiling on the wall. Of course, being young kids who weren't supposed to be giggling, it made the giggling even worse than it was before and we just couldn't contain ourselves. This teacher flipped her lid, and I mean flipped her lid. We had this book where you got a mark next to your name if you did something bad. After telling her she had just gone past my name, very politely and quietly I might add, she threw it at me and told me to get out of her classroom. Her bulging veins and blood-red face made my exit swift and tearful. Anyways, the next year we didn't have her anymore, but her freak out had certainly left me with a sour taste in my mouth. Teachers didn't usually react to me that way, and that was probably the first time in my entire school career that I'd been shouted at. Then one day she stopped coming into school, and at the end of that week we discovered that she had gotten brain cancer. All my hatred for her instantly melted and I felt completely horrible. Left the school shortly after, so I never quite found out if she made it or not. That could have been what caused her freak out. Brain cancer has character psychological effects before egg pain. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.